The question is, what proportion of undergraduate degrees were earned by women in 2012? So, correctly, 46.8% of you who polled, and we had 44, almost 50 responses from the room. 46.8% said that it was 60% and 29.8% said 50%. So, in fact, 60% is correct. So that's pretty good. I think there's a little bit of rounding in there. Okay, next question. Okay. Slightly less responses coming through. Oh, there we go. Okay. So what proportion of board positions in Australia were held by women in 2013? So what proportion? So less than 5? It's the majority of answers. That's correct. Oh, no, actually 16% is correct, isn't it?
It's top 200.
Top
no,
200.
it's top 100. I think it's 16%.
Yeah,
now.
So this is all boards.
All boards. It'd be
is
lower.
Less than 5.
It'd be less than 5.
That's right. So the top 200 stat is about 16%, but across all boards it's less than 5.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next one. A little refresh. Yep, there we go. So how many boards in the ASX 200 do not have any women? And the answer is 48 out of the 200. Guess what? They're not as profitable. The stats are crazy. Yeah. The stats are absolutely. The stats are that the boards that have 2 to 3 women on the boards have greater sales growth, greater profitability. They've got diversity. It just makes sense. So on that note, Linda, why do we need to address this gender balance issue?
Well, I think the stats are just so obvious. I mean, I actually thought it was 55% of graduates from university today were women, but it's probably closer to 60% now. My stats are probably out of date. But that's just such an incredible talent pool. And we talk about productivity in this country, and we talk about utilising the talent base that we have. And we have then the stats that you see, amount women on boards, which is, in terms of top 100, 16%. But when you look at women in senior executive positions, it's actually less than 10%. And when you look at CEOs, that's around 3%. To me, that's just such a terrible, terrible waste. And, when the World Economic Forum did some stats on women recently, I was just absolutely shocked to see that we had the stats about women in terms of university, but when we looked at, in fact, we rated, I think, number 1 in terms of OECD countries, in terms of women graduates from university as a percentage of total. But when you looked at workforce participation, we ranked 45th. Now, that is just a ridiculous gap. So something's going on here, that all these women are coming out of university. We're bringing them into companies like PwC, QBE, AGL and others. We're training them up, spending a lot of money on them, and somehow we're losing them. And to me, that's just an enormous waste of talent. I'm not negative about that, in that I don't think we're not doing anything about it. I think there actually has been a serious wake-up call on that. And I think that happened in 2008 when then EOA came out with their results. The Equal Opportunity in the Workplace Agency came out with their results of their surveys. And the trend started to go in the wrong direction. Actually went down. The number of women on boards went down, and the number of women in senior executive positions went down as a percentage, which was just, quite frankly, shocking. I think that was a big wake-up call for everybody. And as a result of that, I think you're seeing a lot more being done now, and I think there's a lot more activity which we can point to and say this is actually really good. So, for example, for the ASX corporate governance guidelines around gender, it really has made a difference, because companies have to now report They have to now actually really focus on it. And it's really, I can give QBE as a case study. You know, we now have targets at QBE around women in terms of our senior executive ranks and all through the organisation, and we never had that before. We also now have a gender, and in fact it's not just gender, it's about diversity and inclusion. We have a Diversity and Inclusion Council. We're operating in 50 countries around the world. It's not just about having the white Anglo-Saxon male running the organisation. It's about having a real diversity of talent. We need people in Argentina, we need people in China, we need people in Thailand. No matter where we are, we need people, and we need local people to really run our businesses, and they're the ones who can build our businesses and do build our businesses very successfully. But we want them to come up through the organisation. So we've got this Diversity and Inclusion Council. The CEO is the chairman of that. We have now a whole range of flexible workplace arrangements for women. We now have a proper maternity leave. Well, it's not just a maternity leave, it's paternity leave as well program. We have a whole range of programs about encouraging women to come back into the workforce once they've had their kids. We have women leadership programs. We're running a whole number of our women through the Chief Executive Women Leaders program. We've got our internal networking for women. And we've now got a whole range of programs that we run as part of our talent development around women, so that we're really looking to develop our female talent in the organisation. We never did that before. And as part of our leadership training, we now have unconscious bias training and a whole range of training around diversity and inclusion. Now, that is just a dramatic change in an organisation in a very short period of time, and I'm seeing that across the board. AGL has the same. And I was president of Chief Executive Women, and we did a lot of work with the Male Champions of Change, which are CEOs of major companies in Australia and organisations, and there's 23 CEOs who've signed up to that, and they're really keen to push this agenda. So there's a lot of things going on out there, which I think there is a sea change of activity and a really strong understanding. It's groups like this, it's evenings like this that really can make a difference. Yep. So I think it's quite exciting, but the numbers aren't good and we've got a long way to go.
Yeah, so somebody said depressingly, we could end up at a century before it changed. I'm like, no, we're going to do better than that. But we talked about a lot about the infrastructure, so things that organisations can do. But it also comes down to the individuals, and one of the logical things that has to be addressed is females are the child bearers and the juggle and the challenges that faces. And one of the things that you talk about in your forward, and also Cheryl talks about, is done is better than perfect. Now, that sentiment, can you share with me or with us, how that philosophy played out in your juggle of the kids and your career and all the pressures that brought in?
I mean, as I say, I meet a lot of women, who are looking for career advice, and I try to give as much advice as I can. But the one thing I say to them is, look, this is not easy. I mean, none of it is easy. If you're trying to juggle kids, I had 4 kids at home at one stage, and it was quite frankly chaotic. But I think you just have to recognise that it is going to be a bit chaotic, and it's not about being perfect. And Cheryl makes that point really well in the book, and I experienced it really well in terms of my life being somewhat chaotic. And even though you might appear smooth and unruffled on the surface, we're all paddling like what underneath. It doesn't really matter. I was saying to earlier that I went and saw Cheryl in San Francisco, and she was actually preparing to go to China to launch the book there. But she's the chief operating officer of Facebook, so she's trying to run the business because Mark Zuckerberg was off somewhere else doing something else. So here am I having a meeting with her on a Friday afternoon. She's trying to run the business, trying to get ready for the book to launch the book in China, get ready for the trip. And she said, and I've got the 2 kids and I've got to get them sorted, before I go. And she's absolutely trying to do her emails, talk to me, have a cup of coffee. And it's exactly the same. We all go through that. So it's, as she said, it's not about being perfect. And she said, I look anything perfect. She said, I want to do a photograph with you. She said, let me get the lipstick out, put the lipstick on. But it is about about recognising that it's not about being perfect. It's doing the best you possibly can in the circumstances and applying yourself 100% while you're there, but also recognising that there's going to be times in your career when you're not going to be able to do some things, and saying that's fine. That is fine. I can come back to that.
And your kids are okay? They're survived? They're resilient? They're doing.
They gave me a hard time along the way, but they're now, I've got 3 girls who are grown up and have all got, their own careers, and a son who's got his own career. And of course, they now look back and go, "Well, we're really glad you did what you did, Mum,"
Yeah.
because you gave us a sense of, independence, a sense of responsibility for ourselves. At the time, I used to get a lot of grief about not being home for this and not being there for that.
All kids do that.
Oh, they all do that. It doesn't matter. Even if you're a mum at home, they do that. And that's what I think you've got to sort of balance off. So, but it is not easy. And I do think, there's many a time when, didn't have the school lunches ready, or didn't have something done, or didn't have the pocket money, or, all of these things that we all go through. But I don't care whether you're a working mum or you're a stay-at-home mum, you're still going to have those problems.
Absolutely. And one of the things you actually mentioned is it also always on the mum? So Cheryl talks about the equal load and changing that and having an agreement with your partner.
And I think that is really important, that, and I think that's what I loved about Cheryl's book. I was asked to write it. I thought, we're not really sure. But once I read it and I saw it was about men and women working together, that's when I thought this is absolutely the right message. Because in any marriage, it's about a partnership, and it is about sharing the load. And I do think men today understand that. And it is about working that out. It's not always easy, but that is absolutely critical. You can't do what you're doing unless you have some sort of equal relationship and sharing of the load.
Talking about support for women, the concept of mentoring, but more importantly sponsoring. You talk about the great advice you got from sponsors who pulled you up and gave you the opportunities. How did you attract them, and how did that relationship form? The lessons learned there.
Yeah, I think that's something that again comes out in Cheryl's book. She talks about mentors versus sponsors. I actually think sponsors are really what make your career and really what support you. I was really fortunate to have the chief executive for Citi being prepared to give me a go and being prepared to sort of really push me to take on this chief administrative officer role for the bank. And then, really living up to his promise to me that if I wanted to go back to a line function, he would provide that transition, which he did. So I moved in to run the financial institution group for Citi. So it's about someone who's, who wants to work with you, who sees that you've got a capability, who's prepared to give you a go and push you. Because I would never put up my hand for that sort of job, because I wouldn't have thought I was capable of doing it.
So what did he see in you? Did he see you taking chances to take on more responsibility?
Yeah,
is that what he saw to then?
I think he'd seen me running the New South Wales corporate finance business and building the business and building a really successful client base. It was a very relationship-driven business, and I think he'd seen that and hiring good people. And I think he thought, well, I had the capability, and he'd seen me with clients. And but I think he sort of said, you said to me one day, look, you've got a great set of skills around transactions. You're really good at managing relationships. You can really go out there and sell a deal. But he said, do you really understand the business as a whole? And I think you would add a lot more to your clients in the future if you actually had a perspective of running a business as a whole. And I thought that was actually a really good thing to say, because I hadn't thought about that. I was a very deal-driven person. But actually looking at the business as a whole, doing the budgeting, the strategy, all of those things, I do think it made me a much better advisor to clients as a result of that, because I understood how our business worked. I could have that perspective.
Okay. One of the big challenges for women, I think, is in terms of speaking up, and through the book that means asking for that promotion, or to go for that salary, or to take that position. Is that easy for you?
I used to be terrible at it. Probably one of the worst. And I think women are really, really not good at this. Most. Some are really good at it, but I think the majority of us are not good. And I really probably was one of the worst.
How did it get better then?
Well, I actually went to a leadership program when I was at City, and it was a leadership development program. And there was a woman facilitating it, and she said, well, you have to sit down and map out what you want to do and where you want to be. And I said, well, I really want to be a vice president. I was an assistant vice president at the time, and I really want to run the corporate finance business. And she said to me, well, you know, how are you going to get there? I said, I don't know. And I said, you know what really seems unfair? I've seen all the people in my position are actually vice presidents already, and I know they get paid more money than me, and I know they get bigger bonuses than me, because I hear about them skiting in the coffee shop, in the locker room. And she said, well, when you sit down for your review each year, do you ask for what you think you deserve? And I said, of course not. No, you would never do that. And she said, well, why not? I said, because my boss will recognise what I do. And she said to me, I don't think so. She said, I bet you all the boys go in there and they've got everything written down that they've done all year, how much they've made, how much they think they're worth, how much they think they should get an increase in salary, and how much bonus they should get paid and when they should get their promotion. And I said, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. She said, well, that's exactly what you're going to have to do if you want to get a promotion. So I actually did then sit down. She said, look, you don't have to be aggressive about it, but you do have to be somewhat assertive and actually say what you deserve. And it was a very, very good lesson for me, because actually within 2 years I had a promotion. I think I'd almost doubled my salary, and I'd certainly increased my bonuses substantially. And it did make me much better, and I think most companies now are much better at this in any case with their staff, where they have, sort of annual, sessions where you sit down and talk about your performance. But I was prepared when I went in for those performance reviews. I was prepared. I knew what I'd contributed to the firm. I knew how much money my team had made. I knew what we'd contributed, and I knew how much I should ask for, because I knew what the other guys were getting paid, and I did ask for what I was worth to the company, and that was a big step for me. And I'll give you just one more anecdote. My daughter, my eldest daughter, was working in London, and she complained to me one day when I was over there, I just haven't had a pay rise, for 3 years. And I said, you haven't had a pay rise for 3 years? She said, oh no. I said, well, when did you last ask for one? Oh no, I wouldn't ask for one. I thought, oh goodness gracious me, I've got to sit down and tell you the same story. So she actually did then ask for a pay rise and got one. But I do think there is a reluctance for women to ask. I think, we are team players naturally. I think it's sort of somewhat outside our comfort zone, but it is so important to ask for what you want. And that's what Cheryl's talking about, sitting at the table, asking for what you deserve. Yeah. And standing up for yourself. And it's not about being aggressive, it's about actually, being assertive and being there.
Yeah.